This is a movement of all sorts of different races, different religions, and that's what these marches have been all the way through. It's reflecting London society, reflecting British society in the 21st century, and there's no hint of hatred. And just looking around, you can see people from all different backgrounds. Hi, how are you today?
Fine, I'm fine.
And you've got here.
This is Basil. He represents one of the children that was killed, and Shifa, she also represents the children killed in Gaza.
And about a third of the people killed in Gaza, the vast majority, a third are children.
They're their children, and that's what's so awful. And I feel like I have to do it in this graphic way, because otherwise people won't understand why we're doing this.
All my education came from brave Jews who were anti-Zionists, including, and I bet you don't know this, and a lot of people don't know this, the great Yehudi Menuhin's father, Moshe Menuhin, wrote this amazing book called The Decadence of Judaism in Our Time, totally anti-Zionist, and he could not get that book published across the length and breadth of so-called free America. And it was eventually published in Beirut at the PLO Research Center. So, you know, I will never, never, never buy into this thing that either we are anti-Semitic or we are anti-Jewish. We are anti-Zionism, which is a political agenda.
The voice of anti-Zionist Jews, making it clear this is not in any way a hate march. This is not anti-Semitic. The hundreds, thousands of Jews will, as usual, be joining us today on this demonstration, speaking out against Netanyahu and Israeli policy.
I think the police are kettling us in, and it feels like they want to aggravate people. The police presence here is really brutal.
The police are now shoving the delegation back. Don't.
I've been to every single march and I've never felt this unsafe. The police are making us feel unsafe. As a woman, I feel unsafe by the level of police presence, and they are not letting us move. They're not letting us move.
Well, I mean, this is what I'm trying to cover every one of these marches, and I can't remember seeing any serious trouble on them whatsoever.
No, we didn't. There was obviously naughty people around looking for that, but we've never had this level of, it feels like an energy wanting something bad to happen. I think the police need to, calm it down.
Donald Trump seems to have secured a ceasefire with Benjamin Netanyahu. Why couldn't the Americans have done this 15 months ago?
They could have done it from the first week after October the 7th, we know that. And they failed to, but not only did they fail to secure the ceasefire, they continued to support Netanyahu with money and arms, and so's the UK government. So they stand condemned. But what we have to do now is make sure the ceasefire holds, of course, but also secure justice for the Palestinians, and that means a Palestinian state.
And can I ask you this, and we were seeing inside Europe, we're seeing governments, particularly the Irish government, but the Spanish as well, taking a very different stance from that of Britain.
I was pleased in terms of what Ireland have done. They've stood firm all the way through, and they've done it on humanitarian grounds. The UK government didn't, I'm afraid. I call for the expulsion of the Israeli ambassador because she's an advocate for Greater Israel. She's opposed to a two-state solution. She's opposed the UN resolutions against Israel itself. I think the UK government could have learnt the example from Ireland.
And in terms of the issue of British arms sales to Israel is one that's not going to go away, is it?
No, it isn't. Despite what the government has said about their assurances they've stopped arms sales, we know they're still supplying arms, particularly for the airplanes that are doing so much damage and killing. That campaign will continue on. And I think at the end of the day, ministers have to realise if they continue the arms sales, they become complicit in the war crimes that are being committed by Israel.
And that's the point as well, isn't it? That's not going to go away. The wheels of justice are going to slow, but they are going to grind on.
Eventually, I want to see Netanyahu in The Hague for the war crimes he's committed. I believe that will happen because these war crimes, I think, have scarred the whole of the globe. Therefore, as a result of that, I think people will not let this rest until we see justice.
With your flags, with your keffiyehs, to join us in celebrating this great victory for Palestine and the movement.
Without the Western media, without its lies, its deflections, its airbrushing of the depraved truth, Israel's genocide in Gaza would not have been possible. For no crime in history, no crime, has been so confessed to by its perpetrators so unapologetically, so shamelessly, so proudly. From the very start, Israel's leaders, they declared that Gaza's civilians were human animals, that an entire nation out there was responsible. As the President of Israel declared, the essentials of life would be cut off, that Gaza would be reduced to a city of tents. They made clear over and over again they were going to wipe Gaza from the face of the earth and wage war against its people. There was no better predictor of what Israel would do to the Palestinian people than what they told the world they would do over and over and over again. And yet, with courageous exceptions, the Western media conspired to suppress Israel's genocidal intent while smearing the few with a platform who spoke out as dangerous, hateful extremists, turning the world upside down.
I've been on virtually, I think, every demonstration, and every time I've spoken about the children of Gaza. This week we've seen the reports of those children, some of which are frozen to death, and others are dying of malnutrition. So yes, we welcome this ceasefire, of course we do, and we'll be working for a lasting peace. But I just want to say this peace wouldn't have been brought about if it hadn't been for the mobilization of people like you across the globe. So I just want to say this. Often we don't thank people enough, but I want to say this. Thank you for the privilege of marching alongside you over this last 15 months. Thank you. I want to say a special thanks to our comrades and friends in the Jewish bloc who've marched alongside us no matter what. I want to thank those trade unions that have stood with us.
We stand here today with a glimmer of hope in our hearts. A ceasefire deal has been agreed. However, we have to be cautious and embrace this moment with trepidation. As we continue with our fight, we must understand that what we have in front of us is a great struggle that has to continue. Your coming out here has been pivotal to ensure that ceasefire deal. Let's not be mistaken. If it wasn't for you coming out week in and week out, it would have been possible for Starmer to get his way and make sure that food has been stopped to the people of Gaza. They would have no electricity and no water. If it wasn't for you, it would have not been possible for the ICJ to prosecute Netanyahu. If it was not for people like you, it would have not been possible to bury the lies from the BBC. You have exposed all that, and for that, let me thank you for coming out, and it is your work that should continue. My friends, as we note, we find ourselves in a very difficult position. Not only the government, the pro-Israeli lobby, the BBC, but unfortunately now the police is even denying us our freedom to march, our freedom of expression, our freedom to demand justice. We must not stop. What we have achieved so far is a milestone which means that if it was not for us, Gaza would have been wiped out. There'd be no people in Gaza left. And therefore we need to continue. And we need to continue to demonstrate. We need to continue to boycott. We need to continue with our campaigning. So let nobody intimidate us. And we will return back and demonstrate and exercise our right for justice, for freedom, and for peace.
Holocaust Memorial Day is just a week away on the 27th
and it brings back memories for me. I was 7 years old when Germany invaded and occupied their unreliable ally Hungary in March 1944. This makes me 87 years old now, but my memories of the hiding as a hunted Jew on false papers and utter devastation of the climatic fighting around us between trapped German army and the Red Army is still crystal clear memory for me today. I see the burnt out cars, tanks, dead horses and human bodies, abandoned ammunition, helmets strewn about, burnt out buildings, mountains of rubble and broken glass everywhere. Just like tragically destroyed Gaza is looking today. Only our area where we were hiding with false names and papers was much smaller. I now think of it as Gaza in miniature. There was even the same sadistic inhumanity at work in targeting hospitals. There was the massacre of the nearby Mary Street Jewish Hospital, and of another one not too far, carried out by the Hungarian fascist Arrow Cross, when they executed doctors, nurses, patients in the courtyards, systematically in pairs, several hundreds of them. This was in January, February 1945, with the war and the battle for Budapest was clearly lost, and this was a last desperate, senseless eruption of sheer racist hatred. Meanwhile, during this total siege for a few months, there was no water, only snow to melt, no electricity, fuel, or no bread, and candles became a kind of currency. Then came the happy anarchic liberation, never again to the cruel past. We Jews in hiding, who had to relocate repeatedly at night under fire into the next supposedly safe destination, whereas a hunted people, lucky survivors, repeating, never again in our names. The bombing and starving, genocidal massacre perpetrated by racist apartheid Israel is simply fascistic, and the comparisons with actions of German fascism of World War II should not be taboo anymore. The news of the ceasefire in the offing must be great relief for the long-suffering Palestinian people. But we, and mostly they, desperately need a permanent ceasefire.
Tomorrow is already yesterday's nightmare. A ceasefire is normally a situation in which warring parties return to peace when the bombs stop falling. But for Palestinians, at best, this ceasefire is a continuation of occupation and apartheid. It is a continuation of the world in which if you were in the West Bank now, leaving this demonstration, every one of you would return home passing through a checkpoint, by an illegal settlement, or a wall that encircled you. You're still under siege, you're still under occupation, your home has been obliterated, family of all ages have been killed in the most gruesome of ways, you've been displaced multiply and intergenerationally, you live in a strip of land with healthcare in ruins, 90% of schools damaged or destroyed, every university flattened, and where they're saying it will take 15 years to clear the rubble, let alone rebuild. Perhaps for you, a ceasefire is simply a moment to grieve the unfathomable loss of more than 46,000 human beings
without drones circling above you. This is the best of all possible worlds.
Now that we've finally got sight of a ceasefire, doesn't mean that we will disband and drift away, because we've seen ceasefires broken before, and there's still a long way to go until we finally get justice for the Palestinian people. So we'll celebrate the ceasefire, but we're going to stay united because there's still a job of work to be done. I want to say to you all, is over tens of national marches, hundreds of local protests. We have been a peaceful movement. We have been a peaceful movement for justice. And what we've seen today, the restrictive policing of this demonstration, is a symptom of what we've seen more broadly in this country, a clampdown on all of our civil rights to dissent, all of our civil rights to protest, and all of our civil rights to have a political voice. It happened to us in the trade union movement, when we beat the government on the picket lines, when we beat the government in a court of public opinion. They went to the law to try to criminalise dissent against poverty. And the policing that we're seeing at the moment is trying to criminalise dissent against injustice. The fight for a free and peaceful world and the fight for workers' rights is the same fight. That is why the RMT is with you, and that is why we must stick together.
Free, free! Free, free! Sisters and brothers, the past 15 months will haunt us forever. Yet despite their relentless attempts to erase us and to extinguish our existence, they have failed, and we are still here. Gaza is the soul of our soul, and we will rebuild it, stronger and more beautiful than ever before. But let me remind you, the Palestinian tragedy does not end when the bombs stop falling. It ends when we are free. It has been 470 days of televised murder, yet the screams, the tears, the images of maimed children, weeping mothers, helpless fathers and traumatized youth have not moved Western politicians as they congratulate themselves on a job well done. This past week, both Keir Starmer and David Lammy have shown us they care more for Israeli propaganda than the humanity of Palestinians. For Starmer, only Israeli mothers feel pain. He talked of Israelis being massacred and brutally murdered, yet Palestinians had merely lost their lives. Such is the disdain they feel for the lives of an inconvenient people.
This is not a protest fueled by hate, and our marches have not been hate marches. These are protests fueled by the love that is at the heart of solidarity, a love of justice, and a recognition that an injustice against anyone, anywhere, is an injustice against everyone.
So the police are now shoving the delegation back. Don't do that again.
Get back now! Get back! Get back! Get back!
So
From the river to the sea! From the river to the sea! From the river to the sea! From the river to